and welcome to our Thursday reflection. The reading is taken from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 27, and beginning to read at the 27th verse. On the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea, when about midnight the sailors sensed they were approaching land. They took soundings and found the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, they took soundings again and found it was 90 feet deep. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes and let the lifeboat drift away. Just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. "For the last 14 days," he said, "you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head." After he said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of them all. Then he broke it and began to eat. They were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. Altogether, there were 276 of us on board. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion, wanting to spare Paul's life, kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or on other pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land safely. And as always, we thank God for his word. Why, oh why, have they never made a blockbuster movie about Paul's journeys and his adventures? That reading would make a really dramatic scene with plenty of tension as people wondered, will he or won't he survive? Of course, we know the answer. So what does this passage say to us? What can we learn from this particular Bible reading? Because the opening line says, "We are still being driven across the sea," we know that Luke is still with Paul on this momentous journey. He's there, faithful friend, going with Paul, standing beside him in his hour of need. Don't forget, Paul is a prisoner being taken to Rome. Many might have deserted him, been ashamed to be seen with him, frightened of what might happen to them, afraid that they would themselves be judged by association. Not Luke. He is steadfast. And I'm wondering, is there anyone who might need our friendship at the present time? Anyone to whom we can be a friend in their time of need, regardless of the particular difficulties with which they're struggling? I know from my own experience how important friendship like that is in the hard times in our lives. The actions of the centurion are also very interesting. His job is to safely deliver all his prisoners. Yet his relationship with Paul is one of trust and confidence rather than jailer and convict. Paul has impressed him so much that on Paul's advice, he cuts the lifeboat adrift. Now, obviously, that's because they cannot allow those who are competent to sail the ship to abandon both prisoners and soldiers. But it's still a great risk. I ask myself, is my faith strong enough to allow me to let go of something that I imagine is essential to my security? And what about when they saw that sandy beach on which they could safely run the ship ashore? And then they hit an unseen sandbank on which the vessel is finally completely wrecked. How often in our lives do we go through difficult times, and just when we feel that things are changing for the better, something unexpected happens and we feel as if we are falling apart, just like that ship. But remember, all reached the shore and all were saved. Luke gives us a vivid portrayal of Paul's helpfulness on board that storm-tossed ship, keeping his head when all about him were losing theirs. At all times thinking of others before himself, even indirectly saving the lives of the other captives. When the soldiers want to kill all the prisoners in case they escape, the centurion, because he wants to save Paul, saves them all. We may never know in this life how much we have, with our actions and our words, influenced others for good or for ill. All these things show Paul preaching the gospel, not only with words, but with his actions, with the way he lives, and with his care for others. And where does he get his strength? He tells us in his second letter to Timothy, "The Lord stood alongside me and gave me strength." So in the storms of this life, may we also be aware of God's strength and presence, bringing us safely ashore. And may we all preach the gospel through our lives as well as our works. God bless and keep you safe. Amen.